Be discussing spoilers for the prologue of the game. Also, this is the product of my overthinking mind, so keep in mind that I simply might be seeing things that are not really there. Brought to you by yours truly, the overthinking final boss. What is the meaning of life? If we all know that it will inevitably end, why do we persevere? And is it truly selfish to bring another human into an already doomed existence? Are the small joys in life truly worth it? These are the questions that echo through the mind as we embark on this journey, questions that tug at the very fabric of our understanding of existence. They linger in the background, subtle but ever present, as the narrative unfolds. Expedition 33 makes us face the existential questions which surely crossed our minds through Pathos and Logos, and after playing the prologue, it left me ugly crying. Since the prologue itself left a deep impression on me, I was prompted to take a deep dive into the themes of the story, their characters, their dynamics, and to touch upon the visual beauty of this game. There is something about simple premises that fascinate me, and as the story twists, delves deeper into the complexities, contrasts, and nuances until it's finally brought to a conclusion. So lean back, relax, as we unfold the story of the Expedition 33. The game is set in a fictional world, where a deity known as a paintress lowers the life expectancy every year. The backdrop is fragmented, almost dreamlike in its appearance, with floating pieces of earth scattered through the sky, and the architecture is inspired by Belle Époque France. The Belle Époque, according to Wikipedia, or La Belle Époque, French for the beautiful era, was a period of French and European history that began after the end of the Franco-Prussian War in 1871 and continued until the outbreak of World War I in 1914. Occurring during the era of the French Third Republic, it was a period characterized by optimism, enlightenment, and romanticism. In the true French fashion, as a rebellious force against the paintress comes the expedition, which is a party of volunteers sent in the efforts of preventing the paintress to decrease the age of living. Gommage in French means to erase, and that is exactly what we see. There are no bones nor gore, only a moment of disintegration, very similar to a scene from the Avengers, when Thanos snaps his fingers upon obtaining every single Infinity Stone. Now, one would expect the day for such a horrible event to be dark and gloomy. Alas, the scenery is nothing short of idyllic in its appearance, flowers being scattered all around, together with very romantic and initially heartwarming scenes that quickly turn bittersweet. Upon our interactions, we get to witness how the people of this fictional world cope with their upcoming but also previous losses. Visually, the game is stunning, with the smooth and fluid combat, and their attacks with light streaks are very reminiscent of Hogwarts Legacy. While the combat mechanics are turn-based, unlike Baldur's Gate or Divinity, you are not allowed to be complacent, as you are still very much expected to dodge the oncoming attacks. I appreciate the way they choreography these attacks because they are very reminiscent of a dance, with just a dash of acrobatics. The game starts off with Gustav's task of bringing Sophie a rose. It is no accident that the writers made sure to make your first task to deliver a red rose for Sophie, as love is presented as a driving force for Gustav, a gesture of love and devotion, a token of deep feelings to an already bygone relationship. The story gives importance to the flower language, and we can see that in several flowers that appear, but also with a character called Ophelia. Ophelia is possibly a parallel to Shakespeare's Ophelia. She is seen as a tragic character whose arc reflects themes of madness, love, and loss. Act 4, Scene 7, Ophelia in her madness distributes flowers to the court with their own respective meanings. But here, Ophelia distributed gerberia flowers, more specifically, red gerberia flower, which some interpret as unconscious love. However, if I'm not mistaken, we can also see flowers such as red hibiscus on Sophie's necklace, meaning love and passion, and also white hibiscus, purity and innocence. Just like with flowers, the designers of this game have also taken the meaning of colors as a way to portray feelings or sentiments about characters. Red is the color of passion and love, and white is the color of innocence and hope, both presented on Sophie, who is also blending in with the scenery, which also serves as a subtle foreshadowing of her fate. Even though Sophie herself wears the color of hope, we can see her true worldview to be grim in an interaction with Marie, and we will touch upon that later. Gustav, on the other hand, his suit is of navy color, representing sincerity, loyalty, and also authority. In a sense, it primes Gustav for being a possible leader for the future expedition. His character is presented as a man of few words. However, that's not to say that he is not emotional. When Gustav meets Sophie, we can see it all: the awkwardness, the excitement, the bittersweet meetup on the last day of Sophie's life. But one thing is clear: the love they still feel for each other is still very much present. While the gathering itself has vivid and bright colors, it is very much a facade, a curtain trying to obscure the true pain and devastation lingering in people's hearts. If you fail to speak to Raphael or miss overhearing three friends that cuss out the paintress, you are leaving a curtain untouched. "We are already dead, everyone is just catching up," is the phrase they use to portray the inevitable truth. With children, there is hope, a hope for a better tomorrow, and the paintress lowering the age of living every year, it is clear that same legacy in the form of children will disappear. And despair is best portrayed in Maxime, the man who lost his wife and is drowning his sorrows in alcohol. It shows what happens when you are overwhelmed with grief, and even though he has a child, that alone is not enough for him to bring him joy. It makes emotional resistance and perseverance that much more important, which might be shown in the form of Gustav's lost arm. I know that makes no sense, but I will try to explain what I mean in the section of Pathos and Logos. It is no accident that Gustav is the one who has this conversation with Maxime. It is a window into a possible future if he succumbs to grief. And while Gustav is trying to provide hope, Maxime refuses that outlook. Maxime, perhaps, with time and support, will heal from the loss of his wife, and the premise of the story, the time of their lives being clearly limited, possibly takes away the time he deserves to heal and grieve. Legacy is another theme in this game. It is brought up in several ways, through art, through people leaving behind their belongings so others who live can utilize them, and also, and most importantly, through children, and the game clearly emphasizes that last part, which is one of the stakes of the story. Now, coming back to Sophie's interaction with Marie. Upon Marie touching the subject of Sophie not giving birth, Marie tells her that she is selfish. However, when Sophie explains that there is no point to giving birth to a world already doomed, and also the same topic being a reason why she lost her loved one, Marie apologizes. We can see Sophie's point clearly shown in the scene, with two boys hugging each other as people around them disappear, but also in the scene of Marie's death and her child being left alone. What point is to the scarred generation, which knows that their parents will not be there to watch them grow and support them throughout their lives? Earlier I said that with children there is hope for a better tomorrow. So in a sense, what Sophie fails to realize, that leaving legacy behind was Marie's reason to persevere. So in the context of this game, and I do mean that literally, Marie shares the trait of a paintress. She refuses to give hope in a form of a legacy that are children. So in Marie's mind, until she was given reason, Sophie was no better than a painter who takes away the legacy. It doesn't justify Marie's comment, but it does explain her initial carelessness. However, Sophie's legacy is portrayed in several ways. One through her conversation with Cyril, where he asks her to give inspiration for tomorrow's headline, and Cyril promises to credit her. Second, through the painting from Nicholas. And third, but not least important, through the emotional impact she has on Gustav, the memories she had imprinted, and hopefully the reason for him to push forth. Now, whoever watched Attack on Titan, they remember that speech from Commander Erwin as they ride into the death, him and his comrades. It serves as a point of one person's death, a fallen comrade, a lost lover, where he says our lives have meaning because we, the living, refuse to forget them. In a sense, both Gustav and Commander Erwin live with the legacy that is the memory of a person, what they stood for, how important their impact was. I mentioned about Marie's conversation with Sophie, that she deems her no better than paintress, and while the two can be any more different, we can see a subtle attempt of bridging the two characters together indirectly. For example, Marie's empathizing with paintress, feeling sorry for her and how sad she looks, she being trapped in the same cycle as them. Again, it seems to me like the writers of the story somehow wanted to establish a connection between the two, perhaps in the sense that they too are opposing forces. One is a possible bringer of life who has refused such outcome, but a vessel of life nonetheless, and another is a thief. Another contrast is presented in the paintress and the painter. One is a deity and another is a human, called Nicholas, each in opposition to one another. One gives life to the canvas, inspired by intangible, while another brings despair. While the one chooses to erase, the other chooses to preserve a moment in time, brought by the paintbrush. Pathos appeals to the emotions of the audience. It's about creating an emotional connection that resonates deeply, whether it's sadness, happiness, anger, fear, or empathy. The goal is to evoke an emotional response that influences the audience's opinion or decision. In this story's case, it's about the way characters react to the inevitable, the erasure of themselves and/or loved ones. The writers expose you to the acquaintances, friends, and the common folk. They make sure that their struggles, while set in a fictional world, are relatable and that they resonate to our innermost fears. That grief and pain of the loss of the loved ones is the evidence of that same loss. And while we may not see their corpses as they are erased, their loss leaves a hole in the heart of the people. So the next segment might be far-reaching, but I still feel like I should put this out there. Character design, especially the deviations of a typical, can tell us a lot about the characters. In the game that colors, flowers have meaning, it's clear that designs have very special meaning. While we can see loss clearly depicted in the absence of Gustav's hand, there is a possibility that it's a representation of an emotional control in effort to preserve himself, as well as proof that he can persevere through the loss. Through metal, he cannot really feel the touch nor the warmth of another. In a sense, it's a barrier from contact, which might translate into resilience. I must talk about the most impactful scene of them all, where Sophie and the rest of the people get erased. But most importantly, I wanted to raise an absence of a goodbye kiss. As we lock lips, we close our eyes, time loses meaning, and we immerse ourselves into the physical. Now, because goodbye kiss was not depicted, it makes me think that they wanted to almost imprint each other's facial features into their memories, no matter how devastating it is seeing a loved one die in front of their eyes. In this case, Gustav seeing Sophie being erased into nothingness. But what we also see is almost a disbelief in the shakes of Sophie's head and her mouth slightly opening, as if to negate the reality that is slowly unraveling around them. See, despite Sophie reassuring Gustav that she had time to prepare, the truth is, we can never be truly prepared for death. But also, I want to point out the emotional control that I brought up earlier in Gustav. As Sophie is disappearing, we can see him only breaking down after she is gone. It takes a lot of composure to be strong during such a sight, and to try and lend the same strength to another. Logos, on the other hand, appeals to reason and logic. It's the use of facts, statistics, evidence, and clear reasoning to convince the audience of an argument's validity. Logos is all about rational persuasion, focusing on intellect and clarity. And what better fact is there that death is inevitable? With the use of evidence and their clever storytelling method, show instead of tell, as they disintegrate into nothingness, the stakes are presented clearly. That the same legacy that is so precious in their many different forms is clearly at the risk of that same disintegration. We are shown how the characters are coping with that same fact. Some deal with disbelief, acceptance, bitterness, and despair. The first hour of the story makes you care, makes you think, and that is truly an accomplishment of its own. With the emergence of artificial intelligence, while very useful in our lives, it reminds us of how, for example, art, while reproducible, it can never be truly inspired. You see, as we are walking through the city with our characters, we can observe that the answers for the point of life, while different for everyone, are all around us. Love, hope, poetry, and art. And when the tragedy and loss are the things that blind us, it's easy to forget the joys in the despair. With the depictions of contrasts, nuances, and subtle intricacies, the storyline is undoubtedly a catalyst for deep reflection. It compels the player to delve into the complexities of human nature, urging them to engage with perspectives that challenge their preconceived notions and broaden their understanding of the world. There must be things I might have missed, interactions I failed to analyze, and maybe you will point it out to me in the comments. Regardless, I really hope you have enjoyed this video, and if you would like me to do a full review of the game, please let me know. And if you haven't enjoyed it, please do subscribe. If not, that's okay. I hope to see you again on my channel regardless. Much love, Mom Cozy Games.